Alright everyone, we start off today talking about critical race theory. Of course, it's one of the more insidious plots that we've seen against the US educational system, and that's really, I'm going to focus on the way to frame fighting it, because I see people making a lot of mistakes with regards to their debate strategy with regards to critical race theory, where they fixate solely on the, and this is something that the left is very happy about, on the racial component of it, because it masquerades as racial justice or anti-racism. They've taken the bait and they're sort of playing the enemy's game and expecting to win while playing by the same rules. And that doesn't work. You have to know maneuverability and strategy. So I'm going to give tips on this, and the clankers, of course, can help to educate and promulgate this to others, and all will be peachy keen. Now, first and foremost, if you're watching this video on YouTube, keep in mind there's a pinned comment down below with links to 4 other video host sites that I use. Keep in mind I make 4 videos a day, only 2 of them end up on YouTube, because otherwise you get abused even more by the algorithms than usual. Trust me, I'm no stranger to algorithmic abuse on the platform. Now, here's the problem. When you are debating someone, and most people don't realize this, your job is not to beat the opponent. Convince the opponent that you're right. It's never going to happen. Their fans, their acolytes, their ideological friends, and so forth, they will consider them to be the winner of the debate, even if they just sit there pooping on themselves. The people that already agree with you, 99% of the time, they leave the debate, they agree that you won. The only way that you win a debate is by talking to the people that are watching on the offsides that don't have a bias. Not talking to your fans, not trying to convince their fans, not trying to convince your debate opponent or who you're arguing with, but other non-biased observers. The fact is that there are a lot of people who know little about critical race theory and what it pertains to. The problem is that people trying to educate them on what it pertains to that oppose it, by and large, are fixating on the racial component. Again, this is by default. It masquerades as anti-racism. Racial justice, basically academic reparations, you could call it. The problem is if you point out the reality, and it is a reality, I don't deny this. If I point out, well, critical race theory basically means anti-white. See, the problem is that a lot of those non-biased observers have already been force-fed a bunch of bullshit propaganda from the left that you can't be racist against white people. White people are privileged. White people are different from the proud people of color, or AAPI, BIPOC, and all of these other acronyms. Very interestingly, the left's overall strategy is to crack people apart if they are white or part of a perceived majority group, and to conglomerate them together totally artificially if they are not. This is mainly for voting purposes. This is for the purpose of elections mainly. This is basically a throwaway that they're using to try to solidify their hold over groups they're losing control of. They're wandering off the plantation, and the leftists are afraid. Talking about race, though, won't be meaningful. It's a losing engagement if that's the strategy that's used. The better strategy is to ignore that proponent of it. And by the way, if you debate leftists on this token, and you bring up the fact that it's simply revisionism, they will re-inject race into the conversation almost invariably. There's a reason that they do that, but as long as it's about race, the left technically can win. Because a lot of those non-biased observers think that you can't be an anti-white racist. You can't be bigoted against someone like me because of privilege. Even if you're dirt-floored living in Appalachia, pregnant in the kitchen with 20 whelplings around you, you're still privileged because your skin happens to be the majority color. Some mythology like that. Rather, shift the debate. Focus on the fact that it's bunk. It's pseudoscience. It's simply wrong. Then dovetail it in with the fact that the educational rate in the United States is steadily falling. The left is usually amenable to the idea that, well, you know, education, it's getting so stupid, people don't know what's going on. Yes, teaching them bunk history won't help. If anything, getting away from civics and towards modern history courses the way they even are before critical race theory was already a loss. We no longer teach people about civics. We teach them social studies. And then you get a little bit of civics in your senior year if you take senior law like I did. And that's basically it. Or if you take an AP course in U.S. history, there's some civics involved kind of in it. You know, praise Mr. Lakin, but not a huge amount. A lot of it's really the history of warfare. But it's bunk. It's just not historical. If you're going to teach a history course, it should be objective history, something that's observable, like this is the year that the war began. This figure gave this speech here. This was the date that cannons were invented. Something like that, something tangible, something that anyone can agree upon. The problem with the analytical side of history is that it's written by the victors, right? We already have this problem. Fuck critical race theory, we already have this issue. If you read a U.S. textbook and a Korean textbook, like from the DPRK about the Korean War, you're getting two entirely different interpretations of what happened. Different things are given different importance. The losers and the winners are judged as noble or ignoble on the basis of which culture you're in. So the U.S. is, we were the brave liberators, they were the evil barbarians tyrannizing people. They would say it was our glorious leader deposed by those evil imperialists. You know, you're looking at like an Iraqi textbook or something, I'm sure that it covers the Iraq War differently than a U.S. textbook. We already have that issue. It's already a problem. The leftists, by the way, champion the concept. They are attempting to take that basic problem and make it 10 times worse with this. The fact is, the United States was not built by slavery. Many of the states never had it to begin with, or abolished it very, very early. Where slavery was present, you have plantation agriculture. It was inefficient already by the 1860s and held things back. Slaves were owned by a small proportion of the southern population. The average person didn't have one. It depressed wages, ironically enough, for southern white workers. Skyscrapers weren't built from cotton. The United States is not a genocidal nation that has killed more people than everyone else, and you should pay reparations and be very, very sorry about it. So-called indigenous people were already being killed by Europeans several centuries before the United States even existed. The U.S. was built primarily in the 1800s, post-Civil War, by the Homestead Act, by a bunch of Europeans pouring in and then building farms and shit. That's the truth. That's the reality. And that's what you get from any competent textbook. What you're getting from so-called critical race theory is, well, actually, it was the exploitation of other people by the European diaspora that built the United States. Now, they should all feel guilty. You know, even if your ancestors never owned slaves at all, you know, you're still kind of guilty of it by proxy because you've benefited from that system. It's essentially teaching a large swath of the population self-hate, guilt, to teach them that they are lesser, ironically based on the color of their skin, and that there's something wrong with them for what other people, sometimes totally dissociated from them in their own lineage, did 100, 200, 300 years ago. But the racial component is not the winning issue if you're an opponent of this bunk, and it is bunk. The ahistorical nature of it is your ally. The fact that it is easily disproven nonsense that's being peddled, the fact that these are all opinions, subjective, based on a retrospective, postmodern analysis of actual events, and often leave out the actual events themselves in favor of hyperbolic, soaring, bloviating language, that's what to target. Because it's the truth. It's the reality. You can omit the racial component. There's a reason why this is being framed. There's a reason why you would frame non-historical history as being racial justice. It's so that people will actually take it up. If you were to tell people, hey, we're just going to revise all of history from a completely incorrect bent that makes no sense and isn't even real, we're going to create essentially a mythological history in which one group of people that happen to largely build large swaths of the country is wrong all the time, people would say, what are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense. First, it sounds hateful. Secondly, it's, what are you talking about? You're not even using real history. You're like insinuating cotton skyscrapers and shit, which should be, by the way, a meme. Frame it as ahistorical, though. If you go off and say, well, that's just anti-white hate, 9/10 of the time, those unbiased people don't think it can be hateful against a white person, including if they themselves are white. Some of these people, by the way, they're like conservatives and shit. It's gone well beyond just, you know, the cringe fringe. It's become accepted, not by the majority of people, at least in private. Trust me, the majority of people realize it's bullshit. But they don't speak about it publicly. They don't have strong feelings, or they don't want to get called hateful. They don't want to get dogpiled on Twitter and stuff like that. Another thing people can do strategically is you need to pierce echo chambers. A lot of times it's like being a voice in the wilderness. If you go anywhere, like if you go to MSNBC, for example, on YouTube, a lot of their videos actually have a fairly decent like to dislike ratio, despite the fact that it's complete tripe. That's because nobody on the right bothers to follow along with the material for critical purposes. The left doesn't have that problem. They use Discord to dogpile right-wing content all the time. there's a discrepancy here. Now, people need to play a little bit of catch-up. Yeah, CRT, I mean, another thing you got to realize is that this is a minority, a shrieking, very loud minority that puffs itself up and looks like a majority. It's sort of like watching a cat make itself all puffy to try to look big and scary by doubling its perceived size. It's doing that because it's not actually big. It's soft and fluffy like this one over here. She's little. But if she puffs herself up and starts growling, she looks a lot bigger. Very intimidating to other small animals. Not to me, but to other animals of comparable size. All of a sudden looks like a giant. Well, that's what people who believe in critical race theory are doing. They just shriek loud and long, and they call anyone who disagrees with them bigoted or problematic, and they hope that you'll shut up and stop fighting back against them. But don't focus on the anti-white hate that's intrinsic in it. Focus on the fact that it's just historical nonsense, and brush up on your U.S. history. You know, there are still a million resources out there, not just online, although now, you know, they're probably going to be Stalinized at some point, so, you know, archive everything, of course. Get a good textbook from, like, the 80s or something like that, from back before, you know, postmodernism, and you'll find reality. Make sure to cross-check your sources as well, because even good textbooks and encyclopedias and shit from 50, 60 years ago that are more accurate than today in many ways, even they have a lot of flaws in them. Now, cross-check them all the time. It's amazing what you'll find. That's about all. Peace out.